Hello everyone. I thought it would be fun to make a short demo video about a new package that I made called Wisdom. Wisdom is a tool for writing and managing your literate Emacs configurations in org mode. So writing these types of configurations isn't anything new, but I wanted to add to create a structured way of doing this because I felt like the current way of doing it, a bit ad hoc, feels a bit lacking and has some problems that I wanted to solve. So a couple of features of this package is that it has first-class support for use package within the org mode file. So I'll show you what that means later. It supports multiple org files. So normally you would have a single org file transpiling to a single Emacs Lisp file, and you could write something to aggregate and find all of your org files and things like that, but Wisdom does that for you. It has low priority management. So for example, you would want your options org file, for example, to load first, and maybe then you want your theme to load, and you can prioritize how you want your org files to load. It has error handling, which I'll show later, and it also has import remote org files. So if you were to, for example, create a org file defining a theme, which is configurable or whatever, you can host it on GitHub. Someone else can pull it into their configuration and then use your org file. And so they can lock it with maybe a git hash or something, a commit hash. But this is still a bit experimental, so I need to flesh this out a bit more. So the current state of literate configurations, there are a couple of problems if you want to use package within org files. So for example, the first problem would be, well, you could write the entire use package statement inside of a single source block. But if you do this, then you lose all the benefits of org mode. So you would have to write all of your documentation in comments. So that doesn't work very well. Another option would be that you write multiple use package statements for the same package. I'm not even sure if this actually works, but maybe it does. And then you do have the ability to write org formatting outside of the source blocks, but you would have to write use package every time for every single variable that you set or function that you define or those kinds of things. So that's not very, it doesn't look very good. Third option would be to open the use package statement and then close it in a separate source block. And then in between you can have, your custom, your config, your init definitions. And then as like puzzle pieces, they would be concatenated together. But this is very brittle and just doesn't really work that well. So I decided to make something else, and I'll show you now what that looks like. So this is an example configuration for Vertigo. Here we have a heading and certain org properties for this heading. So properties are standard org mode, right? This is nothing new, but these properties are read by Wisdom, and then it uses these properties to determine how to transpile this file. So here we see package is Vertigo and straight is true. So this will tell Wisdom to transpile this to a use package, calling Vertigo and setting straight to true. So we use the straight package manager. Next, we have a init definition. So this is a subheading with an init key. This will tell Wisdom that the current heading that we're working in right now, every source block should be inside of the init key for this use package right here. So inside of Vertigo init, we will have Vertigo mode. Next, we have a custom key. Same idea. Every source block that's inside of this heading will be appended in the custom block for the use package. But this also allows you to write org formatting outside of the source block, so you get the benefits of org as well, and you can have these source blocks all separated in isolation, and they get concatenated, aggregated and concatenated at the end. Now, of course, this works, but right? If you look at this, even though it might look nice, you know, it might be a bit difficult to parse. So you might not be able to see exactly what is going on in terms of code if you look at pure code. So Wisdom actually provides a way to preview the transpiled code from your org file. So this org file currently only has this vertical statement. And you can see here that we have use package vertical, straight is set to true. Then we have init, vertical mode, custom, right, etc. So you can see that all of this gets aggregated, concatenated, and transpiled into a proper use package statement, even though all of these Emacs Lisp source blocks are in isolation. So that's really cool. And if you make any changes here, for example, let's say we want a count of 10 instead of 15. If we save this, then you actually see the count in the preview change to 10. So you have live updates when working on in your org files, so you can actually see what you're doing. Now we could, for example, add a new package, consult, for example. We can save this, then you actually see use package consult added to the preview. We can add a general key binding. So for example, SP would be consult rip grep and grep in project, right? So this works quite well. You can have live updates and what your end result's going to look like. So you have the benefits of the literate expression, right? You can express yourself in org mode however you like, and you get the transpiling in a good way with a preview so that you know exactly what you're doing, what the end result is. Because if you have to edit these org files and then you have to test it when you start your Emacs application, and then you notice that something goes wrong or whatever, it's a bit annoying to manage that. But this allows you to preview it in a nice way, I think. Now, what happens if we create a new heading, top level heading, and we do not declare a use package statement? So we could, for example, create a function, my function, interactive, and we just say hello world, whatever, doesn't matter. So here we define a function, my function, and just messages hello world. And you can see that this function is not inside of a use package statement. It gets placed on top of the preview file. And this is also the way that it's transpiled. So the order that you see this now, that is the end result as well. So if you place any Emacs Lisp code outside of a package and it gets placed on the top of the file, and this is basically an escape hatch that you don't have to use package for everything. You can just write simple functions if you'd like, and there's no lock-in or anything like that. So as long as you're out, if you're not writing within a package statement and a package key, then you can write in the top level basically. So now I would like to create another source block, and we're actually going to introduce an error. So here we have an arithmetic error. We're dividing 1 by 0, which is of course not possible. And we have all of this code below this. So what would happen is this would get transpiled in Emacs Lisp. When you boot Emacs, it'll read this file and evaluate it, and it'll break here, and all of this code will not get evaluated. So that's what's happening right now, right here. So let's boot Emacs and see what happens. So here, this is the boot screen. You can see all of the org files being loaded, and once everything is loaded, you get a list of errors if there are any. But here we can see the error that we introduced in the demo.org file with the line number 183, arithmetic error. Now, this is already very nice because normally when you introduce an error like this, right, you get this big stack trace or you get just a bunch of spaghetti code, right? You don't really know what's going on. I've had countless moments in my Emacs life where I would create an error somewhere, especially before use package, I would write an error somewhere and I would boot up my system and I would have no idea where the error is. And good luck finding it, right? But here you can actually see it has the actual org file, so not the Emacs Lisp file where it transpiles to, but the actual org file and the line number of the source block. So if you take a look at this now, you can see that it actually takes us to the source block. So we can actually, just get rid of this, and now we fixed the error, right? So that's actually quite nice. Right, it's a lot better than having to look through stack traces or anything like that. And as I showed you before, this function was called afterwards. So this means that this function should not be defined. But if we try to call it, we actually get the hello world, and we see that this function was actually evaluated, even though we had an error before this function got called. So that's quite magical, but it isn't really. So if we look at what Wisdom is doing, basically every Emacs Lisp source block gets wrapped in a condition case. So for example, here is the code that we wrote, 1 divided by 0, which of course fails. And when it fails, it actually logs an error. So it logs the actual org file where this error occurs, and it logs the line number where the source block is defined. So when this fails, it'll actually show us where in the file and where the source block is, and we'll be able to easily identify, or more easily identify, the error, right? It depends. If you have one big, large source block, then it might be very difficult. But if you have many small source blocks, then it will be relatively easy to find the error. And another thing is like all the other source blocks are wrapped in a condition case. And so my function is basically defined in isolation from my previous error. So even though this failed, the rest of the code will just continue. And this is with all of the Wisdom org files, right? I had 37 org files. Every org file, can have 10 or 1 to 500 source blocks, and they all are wrapped in condition case. So the smaller your source blocks are, the better, because you will be able to, right, your code will become less brittle, because if something fails, the rest will keep going. So normally, like the half of your, if you have an error at the somewhere halfway of your configuration, normally the half of your configuration will just break. And I've had this happen to me many, many times. But with Wisdom, if something breaks, then only that source block breaks. So the rest of your code keeps working. And, at all times, 99% of your Emacs configuration will work, and you'll never, well, never say never, but the chances of you not having evil mode or consult or vertigo, those chances are a lot slimmer, because these pieces of code, these source blocks are evaluated in isolation. And same thing here, right? This init source block is wrapped in a condition case. So if you have multiple source blocks inside of this init, then they are all wrapped in condition cases, right? Which is just great. So that's basically the bread and butter of Wisdom. You can set the priority by placing a priority property on the top of the file, and then lower loads first. So if you say priority 0, then we'll have the highest priority. And so this is like the options file, so I want that to be loaded as first. If you would like to use this, this is what's needed. So in your Emacs init file, this is basically all the Emacs code that you need. You install straight as you would normally. You install the newest package or newest version of org, always good to do. And then you just use package to install wisdom. So you set the org directory and the output directory. The org directory is where you write all of your org files, and the output directory is where the Emacs Lisp files will end up. And so here you can then call wisdom boot, which will load all of your files, compile and load. And it'll also give you the boot screen with the error messages and things like that. Or if you want, right, maybe you want to do something else, you can manually call compile and load. That way you can have more control maybe. So that's about it. I think it's, a pretty neat package. I've been using it for quite a while. I haven't open sourced it up until now. So I'm curious to see what you all think of this. And I'd love to hear feedback, as any suggestions on how to improve this even further. Let me know. The repository is in the description, and I look forward to hearing from you all. So have a nice day, and until next time.